Hello students, here we are continuing our reading of the novel Daytripper, looking at elements of chapter 3. Briefly, before we analyze chapter 3, let's look at some of the key themes that I've asked you to pay attention to as you read the novel. One of the first ones is the concept of family, especially the role masculinity and father figures play in family. You'll see this played out in chapters 3 and 4 especially. Next is the role of nature versus life in the city, the differences between the way the city is presented in the novel versus the way more rural settings are presented. Next, as always, is the concept of death, the way death is factored into our lives, the way that through death, all other parts of life achieve meaning. Finally, is the concept of truth, or what you might say, meaning in life, to use that sort of trite phrase. Throughout this book, we have mentioned that Braz is looking to find some form of meaning or truth about his life. He hopes to find this in his work, his love life, his relationships, and his family. In this chapter, chapter 3, Braz learns an important lesson about what types of truths he should be searching for. This theme, the theme of truth, or finding meaning in someone's life, is a key theme of chapter 3, and one in which chapter 3 ruminates most deeply about. So as we begin with chapter 3 immediately plays off the foreshadowing of chapter 2, since in this version of Braz's life, Olinda and Braz are still destined not to be one in a relationship, but two, as two separate people, as we see their relationship fall apart. It is important to remember that this issue, chapter 3, would have come out a month after chapter 2. So this foreshadowing that even in this version of Braz's life, he and Olinda are destined to be two people, not one people, would have more strength as an element of foreshadowing than if we're reading it in the graphic novel. So, as Braz and Olinda are separating, as they are breaking up, we see Braz at the age of 28, left only with the harsh words of his former girlfriend, and left wondering what he should do next. Even though we see Braz here at the more adult age of 28, we still see a man who is searching for meaning in his life. We get a sense that the 7 years between chapters 2 and 3 have been a sort of holding pattern for Braz, one in which, even though he was ready to begin his life and start a new job in chapter 2, we see him sort of not progressing. We see a bare apartment. We see someone who is still searching and trying to find purpose and achieve his goals in life. In chapter 3, we are introduced to Braz's father, Benedito. Benedito is a key figure for Braz, not just because he is his father, but also because he is a famous father. Benedito's literary legacy, his fame as an author, really impacts Braz and Braz's own searching for truth about his life. We are given a speech where Braz is giving a lecture to a crowded auditorium. He outlines this concept of the city as a desert, where we live in a society populated by strangers. Moon and Ba, through the character of Benedito here, are referencing a long line of urban sociological theories. We may see ideas referenced by people like George Simmel, Emile Durkheim, and others. A lot of this was developed around the notion that even though a city is filled with thousands or millions of people, there can be an alienating and social isolation factor of cities. As Benedito says, each day we feel more distant from each other, more alone, all the while being surrounded by millions. Each day we watch as our city turns into a desert, one in which we are all lost. This concept is that the fact a city is filled with people, in fact, due to the very nature of having so many people, theories of urban and rural divide sometimes have suggested that the city can be isolating and alienating, where closer relationships are harder to find due to the constant energy, capitalist mechanisms, and the huge variety of people that you see. It's this notion of for Benedito, a city as a desert, that even though we are in a city populated with thousands or millions of people, we are in fact alone, like a lone wanderer in a desert. This concept of how we need to find the oasis called love in the desert becomes a central point between the talk between father and son later on in chapter 3, which we will discuss. Also, this notion of a desert will play a key part in another part of the graphic novel. So be prepared to see what it means looking for someone, a stranger or a friend in a desert environment. Keep that in mind, as it will show up later on in the novel. So now we get to the central part of chapter 3. This conversation between father and son is another moment when Bras is being taught a lesson. And whenever Bras is being taught a lesson, we too, the readers, are being taught a lesson by Moon and Ba. Benedito tells Bras his lesson for life. He argues that waiting to write about romance or life is not important as being able to live it. This sets up a dichotomy where living and writing are opposite poles. Writing in this sense becomes equated to the very act of waiting. Benedito is trying to tell his son that if he is sitting around waiting for his life to have purpose, as opposed to actually going out and just experiencing and doing things, his life will never have purpose. It is only through the act of trying to take risks and live his life will he be able to more accurately write about life. This concept is further expanded upon in this speech about moments. This is the key part of chapter 3 and the major thematic gesture made by Moon and Ba in this chapter. Benedito tells his son that life is made of moments. Relationships are based on moments, choices, actions. And you will only find one moment to carry with you after all the others fade, the one moment which will make all the others worthwhile. He tells his son that he should look for these moments, moments you'll never forget. So this suggestion that life is made up of a series of moments argues that there is no grand narrative to life, that trying to fit your life and the conception of your life into a grand story with a beginning, middle, and end is for Benedito and Moon and Ba an impossible task. The best you can do with life, the best we'll ever get, is finding one moment that everything else will be worthwhile. It is in this radical concept of one moment that makes all the other moments of life worthwhile that Moon and Ba make a central claim about the notion of truth and meaning in life. There is no grand narratives, there is no grand meaning of life, there is no one major purpose of any person's life. It's just the individual moments, the individual choices that matter. The rest of chapter 3 has Ba ruminating on this lesson and essentially learning its key lesson, its key moments, too late. At the store, the narrator claims that Bras could find nothing that stands out, nothing he couldn't live without. So we see him working through this lesson of his father, this idea that life is made of a series of moments, but he's not quite understanding it until he sees the woman in the store with whom he has an instant connection. This is also another foreshadowing moment, although if you've been paying close attention, you have noticed that we have met this woman before. But from this point on, this character of this woman will become a central character in the novel. So Bras has made the decision to speak to the woman. He claims that he feels, incredibly alive and that anything and everything is possible. This is it, he thinks. This is the moment where his life can truly begin. However, because of his indecision, because he didn't grasp that moment at the exact time that it's happened, we are seeing that Bras, as a character, has learned the lesson of his father, but has just learned it too late. So this key theme about truth, that life is nothing but moments that we have, brief, fleeting individual actions, choices, uh, occurrences, is something that Bros realizes, but he realizes too late, and this indecision causes him to get hit by the car. Also, the delivery van with the word foda is an inside joke in Portuguese, as that is the Portuguese equivalent of the word fuck. So, if we circle back to the key thematic claim of Chapter 3, we see the idea that life is made of small moments, which may seem like a trite, live in the now type statement made by Moon and Ba, as if a sort of expanded hippie ideology, but I do think they are making a more radical point, a point that gets developed later on in the novel. One of the things that this point can do, and that we can structure and look at here, is that if life is made of nothing but small moments, then even the briefest of lives can have wide-ranging and impactful meanings. So we now have had 3 chapters where we see Bros dying at 3 different times in his life. As a young man, as a middle-aged man, and as a still young man in his late 20s. All of these could be sad. Someone dying that young seems like a tragedy because of the life they have not lived. But if we look at life as a series of moments, important moments that make all of the other moments worthwhile, then even the deaths of Bros at these young age become something impactful, become something important. Bros has not yet learned this lesson, but Moon and Ba are hoping you, as the reader, understand that thinking of life as a series of moments recontextualizes how you value what you have done in your life, what you have not done in your life, and what you will never do. If you think of life as a series of moments, there's no issue of having a life left unlived. If you didn't accomplish it, who cares? What did you accomplish? What moments did you have? What are the moments that make all of the other moments of your life, boring, bad, and otherwise, important? So take this notion that life is a series of moments means that whenever someone dies, it's less about the life that they didn't have a chance to live, but more of a chance to look back at the moments that they had, the intense, powerful, essential moments of their life that they were able to achieve. And everyone has those. So, this concept is introduced in Chapter 3 and will be played upon in later chapters and developed and thought through in a more thorough manner from Moon and Ba. So, to take away the main question of Chapter 3, we see the discussion of the role of truth or meaning in life. So ask yourself, as a reading question, how does the discussion between Bros and his father impact on the notion of finding meaning in life? What does the father mean that moments are key to finding happiness and meaning in life? If you can answer this question, you will have a strong understanding of the thematic argument made in Chapter 3. Thank you, students, and we will pick up our discussion of Daytripper in the video on Chapter 4.